Hey there YouTube, it's Petey Two Finger talking about Rangemasters. Now, a lot of this is theoretical. The main point is this 2n2369. Not to be confused with 2n369. That's a germanium. The 2n2369 is a silicon switching transistor with low HFE. I got a bag of 10 of these off of AliExpress. Cost me about 10 bucks, and at this point in the game, I'm going to say, if I were to recommend you a transistor, if you were going to build a Rangemaster and you didn't want to use a germanium transistor, if you were going to build an NPN silicon Rangemaster, this is the transistor that I recommend. 2n2369. The one that I have in my circuit right now is a 100 HFE, and it doesn't completely neuter the low end and the mid-range, and it just really sounds good. That's the thing about if you're trying, when you say, well, I'm going to build a Rangemaster, but I'm going to do an NPN silicon version, well, it's not a Rangemaster. And that's fine, and I understand there's purists and people would want to have that germanium. If you play outdoors in the summer and you're running into higher temperatures, that's not going to work out. Now, there is a thing where you can run a 1N34A germanium diode in between the emitter and the collector, with the line on the diode facing the collector. I believe it is, don't quote me. JHS is a guy that knows about this, but adding that diode can help to stabilize your Rangemaster in extreme temperature situations. So I gotta try that. Like, supposedly there's a guy mailing me some NPN. They're called Mullard 950s, and they're a perfect transistor, but they're NPN. They're germanium NPN, because the original Rangemaster, of course, as we know, is germanium PNP. So I found these 2n2369 silicon switching transistors to really sound excellent. I think that if you build and again, this is theoretical, but from my experience, in the fall, I got into building Rangemasters, and I've kind of been doing quite a bit of that and experimenting with this. I've been pairing it with Vox AC15, Vox AC30, Roland Jazz Chorus type amp tones with an amp modeler called a New XMG30, and I run these circuits in the effects loop. Now, ideally, you're supposed to run a single coil Stratocaster with just a cable going right into the Rangemaster for you to really get the best experience and the magical tone of the germanium. You can't have anything before that. Well, I've played around with this, and the best sound I'm getting is in the effects loop, but running the effects loop at the very beginning of the chain. Maybe having a compressor before it, maybe sometimes. But my experience has showed me that it doesn't ruin the tone so much of the Rangemaster. And I'm going to be trying, I built a pickup simulator pedal which has a transformer in it. And this fools your pedal into seeing a single coil pickup. So I can experiment with that. I've got a to-do list of things. I built this multi-effector with a treble booster, a mid-range booster, and a bass booster. This is a 83 TB Greg Fryer, or is it Pete Cornish? The 83 TB, I'm not sure who designed it. I'm going to say it's Greg Fryer. I think the 83 TB, the Pete Cornish version is different. I have the BC 239 in here, and it's a great treble booster, but it's not a Rangemaster. It doesn't cut the mids and lows as like I want to. And I like what I want is more of a slant. I don't want like my highs pushed up and then all my mids just a cliff. I want more like, here's your straight guitar signal, and if I could have it just like this would be the treble. Like leave your bass and mid range about alone, maybe a little bit off, and then bring up the. Because when I started playing with this back in the fall, I would use a pedal immediately after the Rangemaster, more of a bass or mid-range, bass and mid-range boost. So you would have the treble boost that cut those frequencies and then bring some of those frequencies back with this additional pedal. So it's multiple pedals to get this really sweet distortion and really sweet sounding boost. And again, it's more clean sounds, or where the distortion is it's not 5150. It's not, and even like, Tony Iommi used this treble booster, but he had a real distorted amp tone. I'm not doing that so much with mine. So, but it's the same in concept. It's all the same thing. And like my laundry list for this is I'm getting switch popping, especially on the last one. So if I can try to deal with that. And then maybe experiment running the pickup simulator in front of it. And if that does really do something magical, I'll build one into this. But this, it's just got the internal battery pack. So you plug the cables into and out of the effects loop, and then hit this power switch and you're ready to go. So for this particular Rangemaster, we can take a look at the schematic. We'll just look at this. As you see here, Q1 is typically a low leakage germanium, 70 to 85. So yeah, I'm even running a little hot with my transistor as it is. And I gotta tell you, I think when people do this, when they build the Rangemaster and they're using a more modern transistor, like 350 HFE or so, I think that's where you run into that thing with the removing too much of the treble effect. I think when you use a lower HFE effect, it doesn't do as much as that, killing your bass and mid-range and cranking the treble. That's just my theory, but I found with this 2n2369 transistor, it seems that my tone is more intact. So coming in on a lot of these circuits, like distortions or fuzz boxes, you always see this, there'll be these capacitors, one on the input and one on the output. And this really helps shape the tone, because in a distortion or a fuzz effect, it's not so pleasant having the low frequencies at full boat. Lowering those makes for a much pleasanter, smoother sounding distortion. It avoids it getting muddy. Same thing with a reverb effect. There's two effects that benefit from boosting the treble and the upper mids and then reducing the lower mids and the bass. And they usually do that with this input capacitor. So one thing people will do is experiment with different values of this. So what I did, I have my stock capacitor is this same value. But then I added a wire before it and a wire after it that goes up to a potentiometer that has a 22 microfarad capacitor, 0.022, I forget what value it is. And the more you adjust that knob, the more extra mids and bass will return to the signal. So that's really the only modification. But in my experience, the higher gain the transistor, like people complaining about ice picky Rangemasters, that may be because you're using the wrong transistor. It may be. And honestly, I'm using Demeter mid boost, mid control, and then this EP boost, which is really a nice sounding boost. I'm using that stuff in tandem with this Rangemaster. So the Greg Fry is in here, and honestly, the magical sound that I was getting was a combination of the Rangemaster cutting those low and mids and then bringing them back with one or the other of these boosts. And I found using the Greg Fry with this, it was too much because the Greg Fry wasn't pulling any of the mids and lows out. So I am going to be pulling this circuit out of here. We're going to put in my Silicon Rangemaster with the 2n2369 transistor in the place, because I think this is it. When I build Rangemasters, this is the transistor I'm going to use. I got to try a lower HFE in there and see what I think. But for now, that's the one that's going in here, and I'm going to see up until we are going to take delivery on these Mullard 950. There was a guy who sells those who I approached him to do a demo for him, and if he would comp me, send a couple transistors my way, I will do a YouTube demo and recommend his business. And he said, I will get those in the mail. I haven't received them. Now, mind you, it hasn't been really enough time for me to expect to take delivery on something that's coming from Eastern Europe. But no cash was exchanged, so I got to see if the guy actually was followed through with it. But in the long run, for me, it's not so much is the germanium, is this Rangemaster. And I say that because if you put a silicon transistor in it, it's not a Rangemaster. And I agree with you. I completely agree with you on that. It's a silicon Rangemaster. It's an NPN silicon version. And that's what I'm going to have going on in this multi-effect until we run into the NPN germanium version, and I can experiment with this 1N34A germanium diode, placing that in between the emitter and the collector of the transistor with the line of the diode facing the collector. I believe this is it stabilizes it from heat issues. So we shall see. I gotta say, I really do love the sound of the Rangemaster. It does something magical. And if you're a pedal builder guy and you've avoided a Rangemaster, I would really encourage you to build yourself one. The only thing is, get yourself some of these 2n2369 silicon transistors first. Don't start off putting a 4 or 800 HFE transistor in a circuit that's designed for 80. You're just asking for trouble. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You guys, thanks for joining me on this one. I was just excited because I had kind of thought this through and made some assumptions. Like, I assumed that when I built the Greg Fry, it would not reduce the low frequencies and the mid frequencies as much as the other Rangemaster did. And I was right about that. When I built this 2n2369, I assumed that perhaps that would be the case as well, and my preliminary test is showing me the same thing. So part of that shrill or ice picky Rangemaster issue may very well be the fact that you're using way too hot of a transistor. I mean, wouldn't that make sense? Wouldn't that make sense if this thing, if you're giving it a tenth of the amount of gas that it's going to sit like this, then if you give it 10 times more gas, it's going to more trouble and less bass, even more so. So maybe that's how it works. In my experience, that's exactly what's going on. I never really saw anybody talk about that, because see, with Rangemasters, what you see, everyone immediately mods that input capacitor. There's all these diagrams of switches to put, how do you throw higher value capacitors in there because it's too shrill, and it's like, well, that's not the problem. You built the thing right, but you put the wrong active in it, and putting a bigger filter cap in it, it's not really the best solution. It's the worst, you know, because the magic of the Rangemaster, it's when you have a Rangemaster that does what it's supposed to do, when it's built, the circuit is built properly, then you'll really hear it. You'll really hear what makes it so special. It almost it's almost like a cocteau, kind of. I've noticed that. But 2n2369. Check them out, you guys. Thanks for joining me on this one, and I will talk to you soon. Hug your pets, and peace.